other side of the planet. It is wonderful to have you all here. Thank you for joining us. This is also an experiment because CSW, I believe, it's the first time happening online. So we'll see how this experiment goes. My name is Miriam Elias. I am with Frontline Defenders, an Irish-based organization focusing on the protection of human rights defenders globally. And I will be the moderator for this session today. Before we begin, let me review some housekeeping items. And this information is also shared in the chat. This event is being live streamed on the European Union delegation's YouTube channel. So if you do not wish to appear on the video, please keep your camera turned off. Also, please make sure your microphone is muted. Also a reminder that we have Spanish and English interpretation, and it's available when you click on the global icon option at the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. We also under some time constraints. We have a lot to discuss and share. Therefore, I respectfully ask all speakers to keep their intervention to their allotted times. If anyone has a question for our panelists, please use the chat and submit your question there, and we'll collate them at the end. We will begin the question and answer session after the panel discussion, after our speakers have a chance to present their interventions. And and I would like now to invite Ambassador Silverio Gonzato for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you everybody for turning up. In particular, I would like to thank our two keynote speakers, our friends Iman and Ilse, for being here today. I think it's important to connect the dots, and that's what we're trying to do today. We're trying to bring together this year's CSW, which is about women's full and effective participation in all spheres of life and decision making, and the elimination of violence against women, with another important topic that is dominating this year, 2021. This year is the year of the planet. It is about climate change, it's about nature, it's about biodiversity. And we want to connect these dots, we want to bring these agendas together by celebrating the courage of women environmental human rights defenders. Their fight is about the environment, but is about actually the enjoyment of a full range of human rights, because you can't enjoy your rights to life, to health, to food, to water, to housing, if the environment you're living in is degraded. And they're also, a key contributor to the work of human rights organizations, large and small. They work at grassroots level, they work at international level, and they work with the most vulnerable groups that are generally those who are confronted with degraded environments, including also indigenous people and minorities. They are courageous. They shed light on exploitations, on violations of rights. They fight for accountability and access to information so that people know their rights, they know what's going on around them. And they do this at incredible risk. According to UNEP, at least 3 people a week are killed simply because they're protecting our environmental rights. And many more are harassed, they're threatened, they're intimidated. And women human rights defenders face additional specific gender-based threats. And we know how much this is true, particularly also during these hard times that we're living through. They also suffer from stigma and social rejection. And yet they're undaunted. They continue the fight. And today we will hear the testimony of 5 such human rights defenders, and we will hear the recommendations that they want to make to us. So it will be an opportunity to hear the views. It will be an opportunity to also celebrate their courage. But I'm also very pleased to say that the EU and UN are working hand in hand to try and address the intimidations, the threats, the violence which targets human rights defenders. And we are really want to work together in trying to address the threat of reprisals against them. And that's why I'm particularly pleased to have Eamon and Ilse addressing us today. And obviously, we are happy to co-host this event with the United States. And I'm glad to have here Jane Nishida, who is the Acting Assistant Administration for International and Tribal Affairs on the Environmental Protection Agency of the US. And of course, I would like also to thank our longstanding partners, Frontline Defenders and Frida, for co-hosting this event. Thank you very much for doing this. So without further ado, let me pass the floor to Jane for her initial remarks, and then we can enter into the substance of today's event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I also want to say it is an honor to be here today to host this event with my colleagues from the EU. I am pleased to take part to help connect the dots, as was just mentioned, and to focus not only on the contributions, but also the courage of women environmental human rights defenders. Many of these women live in regions severely impacted by environmental degradation, and they call attention to and develop solutions to specific incidences when the environment is harmed, often at risk to their personal well-being and safety. Today, we hope that participants can share some best practices that member states and other stakeholders can take to protect these women and facilitate their work. The United States is seeking to work with other countries and partners, both bilaterally and multilaterally, to move quickly to build resilience, both at home and abroad, against the impacts of climate change and environmental injustice. As President Biden stated in his executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, in our pursuit of sustainable economy, we will bring opportunity to communities too often left behind, places that had suffered as a result of economic shifts and places that have suffered the most from persistent pollution. Domestically, we are committed to ensure that environmental and economic justice are key considerations in how we govern, and that we work collaboratively with vulnerable and underserved communities to help them become healthier, thriving communities across rural, urban, and indigenous areas in the United States. The United States is prioritizing environmental justice to spur economic opportunity for communities that have been historically marginalized and overburdened by pollution and underinvested in terms of housing, transportation, water, and healthcare. We are including the use of science and data to better inform our decision-making and alter the manner in which resources are prioritized to these communities, and by collaborating with all stakeholders to meet the challenges and pressing issues, environmental issues. We will need the leadership and involvement of women to tackle our biggest environmental challenges, which are also our greatest societal challenges. Whether we are talking about access to clean drinking water and sanitation, or access to clean air quality and better public health, women bear a disproportionate impact. As Vice President Kamala Harris noted yesterday, women who live in poverty are disproportionately impacted by climate change. But women are also important change makers, organizing our communities, developing new approaches, sharing innovations, and leading us to greater sustainability. We will make better choices, more just choices, when women are active in environmental decision-making at all levels, so that gender concerns and perspectives are integrated into policies and programs for sustainable development and sustainable communities. It is therefore a great pleasure to be here today I very much look forward to hearing the experiences and insight of our environmental women human rights defenders. And I want to thank you for all that you do, not only for your communities, but for communities around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Ms. Nishida, for your remarks. Allow me now to give the floor to the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights, Mr. Eamon Gilmore, to share a few words on the importance the European Union gives to this topic.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you also, Silvio and Jane, for your introductory remarks. It is a great pleasure for the European Union to join with the United States and also with Frontline Defenders in co-hosting this event today. And of course, to join the Assistant Secretary General, Ilse Brands-Keris, and 5 outstanding women human rights defenders, Irina, Melania, Miriam, Rizwana, and Phyllis. This discussion brings together 2 inseparable imperatives for humanity: protecting the planet and protecting people. During this past year, the COVID-19 crisis has shown us even more clearly the interconnectedness and universality of human rights and the need for a rights-based approach to crises, including to climate change and to the protection of the environment. Even before the pandemic, it was clear that environmental harm interferes with the enjoyment of human rights, while conversely, the exercise of human rights helps to protect the environment. Women environmental human rights defenders are at the heart of that inseparable relationship between the protection of the planet and the protection of human rights. The EU is extremely concerned about the growing backlash against women's rights around the world, as well as increased violence against women human rights defenders. Women human rights defenders are especially at risk of sexual and gender-based violence and suffer threats, stigma, and worse, not only because they are promoting and defending the rights of others, but also because they are women doing that work. They are disproportionately at risk of suffering multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. This is further compounded when women defend environmental, land, or Indigenous people's rights. According to reports, defenders working on these rights are nearly 3 times more likely to be assaulted than other human rights defenders. This type of violence is often linked to impunity. To address these challenges, the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy and the EU Gender Action Plan set out a range of specific measures to support and protect human rights defenders, and in particular, women defenders and environmental defenders. Using the EU guidelines on human rights defenders, our delegations and member states' embassies all around the world are active on a daily basis to protect human rights defenders through trial monitoring, prison visits, meetings with defenders at risk, statements, and many other actions. Special attention is given to women human rights defenders. This is also a priority for the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, which has funding of 1.5 billion euros from 2021 to 2027. In addition, more than 20,000 women human rights defenders have been supported by the EU-funded ProtectDefenders.eu mechanism between 2015 and 2020. Yet in these difficult times, we must do more, and I can assure you that the EU will continue to work with all actors, civil society, government, the private sector, and others to ensure that all defenders, and especially women environmental human rights defenders, can carry out their work free from hindrance or insecurity. Defenders are drivers of change who sound the early warnings before violations or abuses of human rights actually happen. And women human rights defenders are critical for ensuring equality, peace, justice, and a better future for us all. I look forward to the discussion that we will have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now give the floor to the Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, Ms. Ilse Brands-Keris, to share a few remarks about the UN perspective.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and it's a pleasure to follow on the wise words of encouraging words of Eamon, and happy to be here together with all of you. I thank the organizers and co-sponsors for convening this event on a very urgent issue. So let me go straight to the heart of the matter. Berta Cáceres was killed for protecting her people's land against land grabbing, illegal logging, and mega projects. Dinti Tantui was sentenced to 7 years in prison for propaganda against the state for her online advocacy work for environmental rights. Margaret Goga Molomo's community is fighting environmentally harmful mining operations, while COVID-19 pandemic has magnified suppression of the voices of women and girls, further undermining their right to participation as they speak up against powerful actors in support of communities that rely on nature for their survival. The list is long and growing. Too many women and girls who stand up every day for people and planet at UN venues such as the CSW or in their own communities suffer consequences, including reprisals that violate their rights. But their contribution is indisputable. I salute today's panelists for sharing their experiences and inspiring activism. Speaking out when so many have been silenced is an act of courage and leadership. Many women environmental human rights defenders are harassed, threatened, beaten, raped, incarcerated, even killed for protecting their ecosystems, land, communities, and their right to development. They are targeted also online, whether participating in regional or intergovernmental fora, or whether they're working at grassroots level. A safe and stable climate, non-toxic environment, and healthy ecosystem are basic elements of the human right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. The global recognition and implementation of this right is critical for an effective response to environmental crises that will protect those most affected. This includes women and girls at heightened risk of being exposed to climate and environmental harms due to economic, social, and cultural constructs. To reduce this risk, it is essential that their right to meaningfully participate and without fear in decision-making be protected and upheld. The UN Human Rights Office works to protect and promote environmental human rights defenders, women in particular, as part of its work to expand civic space, counter discrimination, and promote access to information and access to justice in the environmental matters. We do so jointly with the UN Environmental Programme, with other UN entities, under the Secretary General's Call to Action for Human Rights, as part of our engagement in the Generation Equality Action Coalitions, and most importantly, directly with women environmental human rights defenders themselves. Free, active, and meaningful participation at all levels is inherent in the right to development. When women participate in environmental action, the result is more inclusive, responsive, effective, simply more sound. We all benefit when harmful gender stereotypes are dismantled and all forms of discrimination against women and girls are eliminated. Guaranteeing the principles of non-discrimination, participation, access to justice for women and girls who defend human rights and the environment, and ensuring accountability for violations is critical for the protection of both planet and people. I look forward to hearing the insights of the panelists, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will now begin the panel discussion. We have with us 5 women environmental human rights defenders from 4 continents, whose inspiring work in very different areas has contributed to women's empowerment and environmental protection around the world. It is a true honor and privilege to have you all with us today. Just to note that the full bios of our amazing participants are in the beginning of the chat. It was shared there, so please check them out in the chat. I will begin with Irina Sukhi, a well-known advocate for environmental rights in Belarus and the founder of EcoHome, one of Belarus' most prominent environmental NGOs. Irina, the world has been watching the situation in Belarus, and your arrest in September was viewed as the state's abuse of the protest context in order to justify arrest and criminalization of civil society organizations. At the same time, there has been massive solidarity on your behalf and on behalf of EcoHome. What have been the most important lessons from this experience, and what is on your agenda at this moment? You muted.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me and have possibility to talk. And
Irina, I'm sorry. You are breaking up. I believe it's probably like we just got the connection. So yeah, let's try that.
Yeah. Where I have to start. So I talk about what happens in Belarus this summer after election, when thousands of women wearing all white, carrying flowers and linking arms in so-called solidarity chains came out to defy the crackdown. It is no exaggeration to say that it changed the course of protest in the country. At that sense, women raise their voices and show their opinion on an equal feet with the men. The role of women in the protest movement in Belarus is very important, and it demonstrates a gradual and successful breaking of stereotypes. Our message is very powerful, message of peace, respect of humanity, combined with a good sense of what is the role of the government and what should be the relation between the citizen and the state. Today, at least 49 women are detained in prison or under house arrest. 38 women are acknowledged as political prisoners. Women who have played prominent role in the protests sweeping Belarus are subject to reprisals and threats. Endemic domestic violence. Women in Belarus have risked everything to stand up for their beliefs. Women-led protests are more likely to remain peaceful and connect with the entire society, their fears and aspirations. It's also great to see that these protests are creating a new generation of female leaders and politicians who can come to the environmental issue. I would like to stress that it's impossible to talk about exercise of environmental rights in a country where basic civil and political rights are not respected. Citizens, NGOs are in constant fear. Now, the situation in the country is a vivid example of the fact that no sphere is out of the politics, in a situation when the state power is illegitimately seized and kept by those who are waging a war against their citizens striving for freedom. We consider it unacceptable that governments and companies from other countries have any cooperation with Belarusian government, do business with state-owned companies in Belarus. Business as usual approach makes our victims worthless. Those foreign institutions, companies and individuals following sacrifices of tens of thousands of Belarusians who have been detained. Hundreds of political prisoners do not matter for business as usual either. I'm often asked how we can help you. Now we are in the midst of social political crisis. The repression continue, and there is no reason to believe that they will be stopped soon. We need to find additional ways to protect eco-defenders and any human rights defenders. We need more confidence that they will be fought for by all available means as soon as they are in trouble. We expect such support from international organizations and institutions. Perhaps a list of people who are involved in environmental activities and are under potential threat is needed. Diplomatic measures to protect us should be taken without delay at the first alarm signal. Given such mechanism, we will feel more protected. It will give us confidence, and probably it is possible to find some kind of technical solutions for such. This is the current situation, and I would like to say a few things about possible future. Of course, there is two scenarios. And I will not now discuss the scenario of positive political changes. In its case, we know what to do. But let us dwell on the scenario of stagnation, protracted political winter. In the situation of stagnation, as it was previous experience in 2010 election, no more than 2 years will pass before the main international organization and national government will return to interact with the Belarusian government. As it was last time, they did not hesitate to accept the rules of the game proposed by the Belarusian government. They adopted cooperation with Gongas instead of the real civil sector. In exchange, they got imitation of cooperation from Belarusian government side. We would like to avoid repeating this mistake again. And it should be find the solution in which strengthening the real civil society will be done by the influence and of the authority of international institution and organization. We hope and fight for democratic change in Belarus. But we will not be able to protect environment if this change will not happen. So their democracy and the environment are connected, and we have to go this both ways together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irina, for this very powerful testimony and also very practical recommendations to all of us in the States. I now turn to Melania Canales Poma, who is the leader of the Quechua people in Peru, who has been working on ensuring Indigenous women's representation within and outside their communities and increasing their capacities. Melania, given your...
muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Buen día.
Sorry, hold on. I will ask the question first. Yeah, sorry. Melania, given your incredible work and achievements in increasing Indigenous women's participation in decision-making regarding their land and environment, what are some main lessons you can share with us today?
Muchas gracias. Allimpuncha o cachun yapalaikichita. Mi saludo en quechua, soy del pueblo quechua, del Perú. Pues bien, yo quisiera en esta vez decir que las mujeres indígenas organizadas luchamos por la defensa de nuestros derechos colectivos e individuales. Y nuestras luchas como mujeres indígenas es hacia el interno, en nuestros propios pueblos indígenas, pero también hacia afuera, exigiendo que los gobiernos implementen y garanticen derechos. En ambos espacios, ¿no?, tanto interno como externo, las mujeres indígenas siempre hemos sido invisibilizadas, ¿no? Invisibilizadas, y todo esto pues tiene que ver con el racismo, el machismo y el colonialismo. Por ello, nuestro trabajo, nuestra lucha es cambiar, como se dice, esas formas de violencia que sufrimos como mujeres indígenas. Y para ello, a nivel interno, en las comunidades, tanto campesinas y nativas, hemos venido promoviendo el cambio de los estatutos en las comunidades y que las mujeres indígenas dentro de nuestras comunidades por lo menos tengamos una participación de una cota que es el 30% de la cota de género y se ha logrado trabajando. Eso es al interno de nuestras comunidades, pero hacia el externo hemos promovido la modificación de la ley de comunidades campesinas para implementar estas cotas de género, que tiene que ver justamente el 30% también, ¿no? Entonces, ese es un trabajo que se ha venido haciendo arduamente, ¿no? Ya se ha modificado la ley, pero seguimos en el trabajo de la modificación de estatutos, porque en el Perú existen más de 10.000 comunidades y es poquito, o los trabajos que hacemos no abastece tanto ahí, ¿no? Pero también es importante que las mujeres indígenas, ¿no? En estos espacios tomemos decisiones, que no solamente seamos algo decorativo, algo como adorno o folclore, sino que nosotras las mujeres indígenas tenemos que participar en la toma de decisiones de la gestión y administración de nuestros territorios. Y no solo debe ser nuestros hermanos indígenas. Las mujeres indígenas hemos tenido menos posibilidades de fortalecer nuestras capacidades por múltiples factores, ¿no? Múltiples factores dentro de, se puede decir, de este sistema, pues, racista y machista, ¿no? Por ello, nos hemos organizado y creo que organizadas es importante caminar, organizadas para intercambiar experiencias, fortalecer nuestras capacidades, defender nuestros derechos colectivos e individuales, defender nuestros territorios. Actualmente venimos promoviendo una ley, el derecho de la madre naturaleza, el derecho de la Pachamama, el derecho de la madre tierra. La destrucción de la madre naturaleza es la destrucción de nuestras vidas. Las mujeres indígenas vemos a la madre naturaleza, a la madre tierra, como un ser vivo y que también tiene derecho. Si es destruida nuestra hábitat, nuestra casa grande, pues va a ser destruida nuestras vidas y hemos visto que esta destrucción está trayendo enfermedades como los metales pesados en la sangre. Estamos viendo que va afectando también nuestras formas de alimentación, nuestras tierras ya no producen. Estamos viendo que va afectando nuestras medicinas. En la pandemia, ¿no? Hemos podido sobrevivir revalorando, reutilizando nuestras medicinas, porque la salud pública pues no llega a nuestras comunidades y eso es una realidad y entonces tenemos que proteger y hemos visto que nuestros ríos por la destrucción de la madre naturaleza está siendo destruida, o sea, también los seres que viven en los ríos. Entonces, esa es una norma que venimos proponiendo. Por supuesto que hay personas, congresistas sobre todo, que no quieren reconocer, son muy antropocéntricos que le dicen, entonces no quieren reconocer estas luchas. Entonces, nuestras luchas es por la defensa del territorio, es un derecho colectivo, ¿no? Y estas luchas sentimos que son colectivos también, que no deben de individualizarse o no deben de personalizarse, porque debilita nuestras luchas, ¿no? Y seguir también acompañando estos liderazgos que sean colectivos, es decir, a las organizaciones de mujeres, ¿no? Hemos visto, por ejemplo, en la Amazonía de nuestros países, hay un control de los hombres, ¿no? Muy fuerte hacia las organizaciones de mujeres, que no quieren que las mujeres se organicen, ¿no? Sino hay un control de nuestros propios hermanos. Y es Y por eso, importante el fortalecimiento entre hermanas, esos diálogos, ¿no? Esa participación que nosotras tenemos y hemos venido también participando en los procesos de consulta previa, libre y informada, y estas decisiones pues deben ser dialogadas en conjunto, en organización, ¿no? Deben ser tomados en cuenta nuestras formas, nuestras miradas, nuestros ritmos, lo que se va a discutir, porque muchas veces, pues, de parte del gobierno son muy, ¿qué te digo? Son muy técnicos, ¿no? Muy técnicos y muchas veces tienden a individualizar o a personalizar. Muchas gracias. Yo sé que el tiempo es oro. Gracias.
Thank you, Melania. And we really appreciate the Indigenous women's perspective on this panel. And also thank you for the honesty talking about colonialism, racism, and how we as women should join forces to fight patriarchal systems, no matter what culture and what community that those structures exist. Thank you. I will now move to Miriam Bracknell from Brazil. Miriam is an educator with 30 years of experience whose focus has been on ensuring public monitoring processes and environmental education. Miriam, my question is around environmental education and how it often gets less attention, but nevertheless extremely important to make sure that the public, including also the next generation, is aware and ready to engage. As an educator, and also as someone who has been engaging with governments, what is your advice to other women and young people on overcoming barriers and adding their voices to be heard, including at high levels?
Thank you, Miriam. I want to greet everyone and thank you for the opportunity to share a little of my experiences and feelings at a time so difficult for the planet and especially for Brazil. Here we have environmental, human rights, and nature defenders. And it's sad to see that all those defenders are under constant threat today. Unfortunately, I have to say that Brazil is collapsing. It holds world records for attacks on activists, and we are experiencing huge setbacks in the social environmental agenda, with high rates of deforestation in practically all Brazilian biomes, and dismantling of legislation and the responsible institutions. Our democracy is in danger, and it seems that the use of fake news and denialism has become a form of government. The lack of national management of the pandemic only worsens this situation, and we have already passed the sad number of 280,000 deaths by COVID-19. The situation for women is serious. Rates of domestic violence have increased, and it was women who mostly lost jobs in that period. This is a short summary. Given this, where are we going to find hope? Education, including environmental education, is an obvious answer, and it's one of the most powerful tools that we can have. The question is how to ensure that everyone has access to quality education. We need to think about and invest in educational processes beyond formal education. It is necessary to support networks and learning communities, promoting inclusion and ensuring effective participation. There is no point, for instance, in providing great online training if people don't have a computer or the internet. I believe a lot in these integration networks. They are spaces for learning, but also for refugee and protection. I have been threatened several times, including death threats. And I know the importance of having information on how to face these situations, as well as having support to ensure security. These are strategies that deserve attention and investment, including international agreements and partnerships. These networks can also assist in post-COVID reconstruction and in tackling the climate crisis. We have many solutions available, and they can and should be used to implement a world economy, the economy that it's really sustainable, green, and inclusive. For example, involving women in activities of the productive chain of restoration will be powerful for transformation. I speak of restoration because it's one of my work fronts. I'm a shout out and hands-on activist at Apremavi, the organization which I'm a founder. I helped to set up a seedling nursery of native trees, which started with 18 seedlings at the backyard, and today has the capacity to produce more than 1 million seedlings of Atlantic rainforest per year. We have thousands of partners, many women who are already engaged in the restoration agenda. And that is why I understand the strength and potential of this. As we say at the Gender and Climate Learning community within the framework of the Climate Observatory, which I'm a member, we women are neither saviors of the planet, nor we are naturally vulnerable. We experience the climate crisis in different ways. It depends on color, class, sexuality, age group, and so many other issues. Our relationship with preservation of life and nature is not a biological inclination. It's an existential and political issue. So I really want to encourage more and more networks of learning, coexistence, and protection. And yes, we need support to move forward. We need opportunities to speak, as this event is doing, for women to share their stories. Projects in which women play a lead role in planning properties, landscapes, territories. Actions that encourage young women to hold public office, to create campaigns and actions to bring women closer to nature and its solutions, helping to care for democratic and inclusive dialogue spaces. How interesting it would be, for example, to have a mobile application that connects all the defenders around the world, worldwide, enabling women to be connected, like trees in a forest. Indigenous, Quilombola women, extractivists, farmers, teachers, students, all of us, we need this worldwide connection for the defense of the rights of people and the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Miriam. So many beautiful words and so powerful. Thank you. And thank you for mentioning hope. I think as someone mentioned in the chat, it's very appreciated and very inspiring. Thank you. I will move to Rizwana Hassan next, who is a lawyer and an activist who has focused on the range of environmental issues, such as pollution, shipbreaking, and deforestation. Shipbreaking is such an important area to address because, as with other forms of environmental, industrial, and household waste, the general public rarely thinks about what happens to this waste. So thank you for your work on this, Rizwana. And the question I'd like to ask is, what prompted you to get involved with this issue specifically? And given the context of Bangladesh, what was it like? What is it like for you to work on this issue as a woman?
Okay, thank you very much. By this issue, I understand you mean the shipbreaking issue.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
Because this is a very important coastal environmental issue in Bangladesh. And it is an issue that not only is generating in Bangladesh, it is actually an issue that's global in nature, because although Bangladesh is breaking the vessels are coming mostly from the European nations, and some of those are coming from countries like Japan, USA, and China. And what prompted me is the very feeling that our country, our beach, our coast cannot be taken as a dumping ground by the developed countries. If the vessels are owned by the developed countries, if the owners have been benefiting while the vessels were plying, then under the international law, it is the country of origin that should take responsibility of the vessel. But that responsibility very cleverly was being shifted on our shoulder on the plea that we need iron, we need steel, and we need employment. Now, I'm not aware of any country in the world that does not need steel. But then there are only 20 countries in the world that have their own iron ore deposit. And there are only 3 shipbreaking countries, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. I should not say India because it's only the Gujarat part of India, not the entire India. So, the whole thing, it's very clear that our countries, our territories were being treated as dumping grounds. That should not be the case. And whenever the vessels were coming to our countries, they were being broken without any precautionary matter whatsoever. So I'm sorry you're having this background sound, but I don't have any control over it. So our beaches were being polluted, our laborers were being killed, and they were getting diseases like asbestosis, which is a form of cancer. And they were getting it because they were inhaling the polluted air of the shipbreaking yards. So, and the European countries and the other countries, where the exporting countries do have the facilities to break the vessels on their own beaches. But instead of doing it, they were evading that legal responsibility and taking advantage of our poverty by sending those vessels on our beach. And I found it totally illegal and also highly unethical and immoral. So we worked on it. We got good judgments from the Supreme Court of Bangladesh. And the good news is the EU Parliament also has enacted law that now says that yards that are not certified by the European Union should not be used by their owners for sending their vessels. So partly the problem has been addressed. So that is what has been, the inspiration for me to get involved in the issue. Now, as a woman, what have I faced? I think as a woman, I faced I had both some plus points and of course some negativity. The plus point is in my society, I was trusted much more easily. And the negative point is the shipbreakers and the importers, the exporters are all very powerful people. They are money, they're connected to their political system. So there was, huge amount of pressure on me. First, we were being branded as anti-development, and we were being told that we want the business to shift from Bangladesh and go to other countries, and that's why we were doing it. And there were protests on the roads that were clearly arranged by the shipbreakers. They arranged the laborers for whose benefit we were fighting the cases to stand with colored posters and say that they want to smash our bones and peel off our skins. And you would definitely know that laborers who get less than $1 a day will not have money to come out with colorful posters. So it was known that those protests were arranged. So there was threat on my personal safety. There were threats on smooth functioning of my organization. But fortunately, since we were relying on international and national law, and we were actually following a legal path, the threats were only up to a certain scale and not beyond it. But the agenda has gained quite a credibility, and it created huge sensation as an issue that has international dimension.
Thank you, Rizwana. So powerful. Thank you for this incredible work. And I think it's so true how often this discourse of labeling environmental defenders, including women environmental defenders, as anti-development, it's very damaging and often works. I hope that there'll be a chance to follow up with more questions on your work in the Q&A session. But right now I would like to move to Phyllis Amido as our next speaker. Phyllis is a Kenyan environmental activist focusing on empowering communities impacted by extractive industries. As with shipbreaking industry, here we're facing a similar main question, which is what happens to industrial waste? There's also another key piece that often gets underplayed or not researched, which is the impact of pollution and metal poisoning on reproductive health. Phyllis, you had learned some of this from your personal experience as a woman and as a mother. The question for you is, what were some of the most helpful tools you had when fighting for due attention and reparation for this issue? And what was missing most and you wish you had?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on the panel today. Okay, when I started my work, I started without knowledge, the basic knowledge that I was an activist to begin with. Because I started to speak out against pollution because it had affected my son and children from a community. What I noticed first is that when I began to speak out about the issue is that it's women who supported me to start with, the women in the community who could see how the pollution, the heavy metal pollution was affecting their children and themselves. Mm-hmm. Some of the women very early on started having miscarriages, losing and when they could not carry their pregnancies to term. Many of them could see that the children's skin were getting affected because of the acid rain that was pouring in the community. But also the heavy metal poisoning was affecting the health of the children, fevers and a lot of health issues on the children. And therefore, very early on, when I began to speak out about lead poisoning in Ong'ong'oro, it is the women who joined me first. So for me, the very first tool that I had was the support of my community, the community that was being affected by the pollution. So because the community joined me and they could see what was happening in the community, it was very important for me in those early stages. Remember when I began, I was just a mother speaking out about issues that were affecting my child and many other children in the community. So most of the time I would even deny when the media asked me, Phyllis, are you an activist? I would say no. When they would print newspaper articles saying environmental activists is speaking against this issue, I would deny it because I did not know that I was an activist and that this was actually a global issue. So the tools that really helped me when I started out were the connections, especially with the UN, because I remember the very first meetings that I attended in the UN where now they opened my eyes to what I was doing and its connectivity with the global movement for access to a clean and healthy environment. And therefore, the very first connections that I had with the UN, especially the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Environment, the Rapporteur on Toxics, the one on Human Rights Defenders, at very early stages, helped me to understand my work as an environmental rights defender, to accept it, and to move forward with it. Because immediately I began, there were threats on my life. I was arrested, I was arraigned in court, charged with inciting violence. I did not expect this. I did not go into it expecting such power to come against me, because there was the corporate power and there was the state power. So both of them were fighting against me. And I was a single individual who was just speaking out about an issue that I felt was going wrong in the community. So my connection, the thing that made me not to give up the first days was the immediate connection that was made between myself and the UN UN systems, where I was able to access advice, I was able to access capacity building, I was able to access networks that were able to help me. The other thing was the international NGOs. I remember Frontline Defenders were the first people who picked up my case. They sent people to court to come and see what was going on in court. They attended court severally. I had people from civil rights defenders in Stockholm that also wrote to me, and they started supporting, because when I was arrested the first time, I was arrested alongside 16 other community members. And they were all looking up to me to raise their bail, I did not have money at first, but these two organizations came together and they enabled us to raise bail and to be able to fight the first fight in court to get back to get our freedom back after a year in court. And therefore the connections between us and the international NGOs were very vital. The other connections, the other tool that really helped us were the organizations that came to help us to do prevalence studies, connecting what was going on in the community and the pollution that was happening, to do blood tests, soil tests, environmental tests. That was very critical for us because at that point we did not have the capacity to be able to do it. And the major weapon that the government and the corporation were using against us. If you see the first letters that they were writing to us, they were saying this thing is made up, Phyllis is making it up, it does not exist, there's no pollution, no one is being, it's just an imagination in your heads. And therefore for us it was so important, the first groups that came in to work with us, to do the tests, to show that actually what we were saying was right and there was actual pollution in the community. Of course, now more than 10 years down the line, even government itself has carried out their own tests that have proven that there was very, very high level of toxic poisoning in Uhuru. The other tool that we had that really helped us was the media, because I remember there are times when we were attacked at night. I was attacked at night, and the first people that I could call were the media people, who in the end highlighted the issues, and they were able to help me even in terms of keeping myself safe, keeping the community safe. Whenever we were attacked, they are the ones, the media is the one that actually highlighted the issue for frontline defenders and civil rights defenders and the UN to pick it up from the media outlets. So those media support that we got was really critical, and it has remained critical to us even up to now when we went to court to seek justice. And to see the declarations on the right to a clean and healthy environment that we felt had been violated in Uhuru. So the media were very, very important to us, but not forgetting that in 2010, Kenya put in, we got a new constitution in Kenya that recognized the right to a clean and healthy environment. This for us was very vital in accessing justice, because then it enabled us to carry all this evidence that we had and go to court and file a case that has now produced a positive judgment for the community, where the community was awarded 1.3 billion Kenya shillings for the fact that their rights to a clean and healthy environment was violated. We would not have achieved this if Kenya did not recognize the right to a clean and healthy environment in the first place. So for us also, it's critical that the laws are in place that would support the work that we are doing at the grassroots level. I think I've taken up all my time for now, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. Wow, this is so inspiring, and also such a great way of describing some of the strategies that work, especially around both international and regional support and visibility, and the role of media when women defenders are facing threats and being disqualified for their work or called liars, etc. So it's really great to see. Thank you for sharing those lessons. And yeah, it's hopefully we'll come back to you in the question and answer session. I would like to thank all of our panelists for such incredible work, your resilience, your participation in this session. We will try now to go summarize some of the questions that are being asked in the chat, and also some of you submitted questions when you registered, so we will try to address at least some of them. There are some questions around that are coming up that were in the suggested questions that when you submitted when you filled out the registration, which primarily around protection needs of women environmental human rights defenders and what international community can do better. Especially in countries where there's no functioning legal mechanism to protect them. And I know some of you already mentioned that we can do better from the international community and from the states, but perhaps we can talk a little bit more about it. And if I can maybe invite Irina to share with us what we can do better to support women like yourself, and what is missing, what is really important when it comes to protection and visibilizing your work and supporting you in other ways. Irina, are you there? Okay.
Yeah, I think she's disconnected.
Okay. Okay, we will then go to the next question and then maybe come back when Irina connects again. Rizwana, there were a number of questions for you and around your work. They are in the chat, but one question was around gender roles. Given that the shipbreaking industry, men who are working in the industry earning very little, how does gender come into play, the role of women in this work? And also there was another question around what else can governments, I guess Western governments, can do, and also citizens in Western countries to support your work and advocate for your work. Is Rizwana connected? I'm not able to see from my screen.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I'm connected.
Okay. Did you get my questions?
I didn't get the questions that are in the chat box that I've got. Yeah.
Yeah. So gender and also what else can be done in terms of international mechanisms and pressure to visibilize your work.
Yeah. See, first, the message has to be conveyed very clearly across the board that each country will have to take the responsibility of dealing with their waste, and waste dumping must stop. Everyone who is involved in any industry, any commerce must behave responsibly. And the countries also have the responsibility of regulating their traders, their business people. If European countries take a very clear stand against sending of their vessels to countries like ours, I think the problem will be solved. There are many technical issues that I'm not going to talk about here, but European countries will have to be very strictly enforcing the rules that they have adopted, and they must ensure that wherever their vessels are going, either from the government or mostly via the traders, they do not come to a country that does not have the environmentally sound management facilities. see, the workers in the shipbreaking industries are mostly migrant workers. So you really do not have 50 families who are working there for generations for you to find out how the women in those houses react to the problems they are faced with. They are mostly laborers moving from the northern part of Bangladesh to the southern part of Bangladesh to do the shipbreaking, and they're not temporary workers, most permanent workers. Most of them are temporary workers, and that is why having a family history of the workers is very difficult for us to get. But I certainly can tell you how a mother feels when her 17-year, 18-year, 21-year-old son dies. How a wife feels when her husband is killed at an early age, leaving behind her and 3 young children. Those feelings are there, but as I said, you won't be able to trace families who are traditionally involved in this particular profession that only takes temporary workers.
Thank you, Rizwana. Just a note for logistics of the meeting, we have until 10:20 EST time, so another 10 or so minutes. There was a question that was submitted, number of questions during registration on funding and also biases around funding of women-led initiatives, local grassroots women-led initiative, and how I think some of you already mentioned that tendency for, I think it was Melania, men still continuing to control those streams of funding or more likely to get funded. So what can be done about this? How can we increase funding, supporting, resourcing women-led environmental and other women-led initiatives? Perhaps I can invite Melania and then maybe Miriam as well. Melania.
Bien, sí. Bien, yo quisiera en esto que es importante tomar en cuenta que se debe de fortalecer a las organizaciones de mujeres indígenas, fortalecer las que ya existen, que ya vienen luchando, ¿no es cierto?, luchando por sus derechos, sobre todo colectivos e individuales, y que nosotras mismas, siempre decimos que nosotras mismas hagamos ahí un apoyo. Bien es cierto que hay un control de los hombres y muchas veces en las organizaciones mixtas crean secretarías de mujer o algo parecido, pero solamente es como para capturar fondos y no necesariamente permiten, como se dice, la fortaleza, ¿no?, de las mujeres. Y muchas veces hemos visto también que utilizan, ¿no?, utilizan a las propias mujeres, se puede decir, a las hermanas, para ir en contra de organizaciones de mujeres, en contra de nosotras mismas, ¿no? Entonces, todo eso es bastante, como le digo, lo que sucede con las organizaciones en nuestros países, y para eso es importante fortalecer las organizaciones que ya existen, ¿no? Entonces, fortalecer en los trabajos, porque no solamente hace un trabajo, ¿no?, como en este caso venimos haciendo trabajos, por ejemplo, de la defensa del derecho de la madre naturaleza, estamos buscando la igualdad, estamos también queriendo que se elimine pues, el racismo, el machismo, y muchas veces cuando se cuestiona, por ejemplo, el machismo en nuestras comunidades, nos dicen, ah, no, es que las mujeres indígenas quieren dividir las organizaciones de los pueblos indígenas, los quieren dividir. Eso nos dicen, porque somos organizaciones territoriales. Algunas organizaciones indígenas dicen, somos organizaciones territoriales, como que si las mujeres somos parte de esa propiedad, somos, ¿no? Entonces, y no nos permiten, pues, andar a nosotras solas. Entonces, yo creo que es importante ese acompañamiento, fortalecer esos procesos colectivos, como le decía anteriormente, y no individuales, sino procesos colectivos que ya existen, ¿no? Entonces, en todos sus agendas que tienen también, que tenemos también las mujeres indígenas.
Thank you, Melania. Miriam, would you like to comment on the question of resourcing and funding of women-led initiatives?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Melania. It's very, very important to support organizations that do this amazing work to empower and give power to women to lead this important work. I think that the organizations that are supporting projects, it's very easy for them to check if the organization is really doing this work to get women included in all the management of the organization, of the projects. Now, today, it's so transparent. Everything is so transparent, and it's not difficult for them to check this. But I will point another thing that I think it's also very important. We have to talk about the financial institutions that today, the banks and etc., that give money, credits for projects, for economy. And this is a system that needs to include women more and more in the administrative structure and in the final work that they do. For instance, I, as a woman, would be very happy if I could go to the bank and have a credit to restore my riparian area. And this in order to have a better property, a better territory, and be protagonists on planning this territory. So the financial issue is very, very important, and we need to open this more and more. And also, I will encourage all the individuals, the women, men, that they can do their job also. They can look NGOs, organizations, communities around that need help and help them. They can do a daily basic work itself. What can I do to be more sustainable? And they can share the stories about the organizations and the women that are making the difference. Because this is a very important point. If the world knows the stories, the world knows the activists and defenders that are threatened, it's a protection shield. It's very, very important. Give this floor to them, tell their stories.
Thank you, Miriam. Yeah, there's this idea percolating in the funding community around how to turn money to healing, from destructive purpose to healing. So I think your idea of getting a bank loan to repair the land, right? That's exactly how we can change it. Thank you. There's a question that is in the chat, and I think it can turn into a broader question around impunity that takes place. And what the specific question is, could we set up an international environmental justice court to try crimes against environmental defenders? And what, perhaps the broader question is, what are some tangible international mechanisms that could be set up to address impunity and crimes, criminalization of environmental defenders, including women? Maybe I can invite Phyllis, if you're willing, to share anything on that, since, especially given your campaign work that involved international entities. Phyllis, you connected? Gonna give you
Seems
seconds.
to have dropped as well, unfortunately.
Okay. Would anyone want to answer this question?
May I just share one process that's ongoing now? It is about drafting a definition of ecocide and trying to see if the ICC statute can be changed to include ecocide so that environmental offenses, the grave ones, can actually be handled by international judicial mechanism. But it is a civil society-led initiative, but there are some European countries who already have expressed their support for this process. So I thought this is something I should flag.
If I can add something, I think this is really very important as we are dealing with the healing and the reconstruction and fighting against climate change globally. We need also this kind of place where we can treat cases that affects all the global. And I don't know exactly how we can improve the mechanisms that we already have, but this is very, very effective. For instance, once when I was threatened by that, we share out a notice telling, "Hi, government, you are supposed to protect all the citizens against violence, and I'm threatened by that right now. So what will happen to me is your responsibility." In doing this, we got a change in the case and we got a lot of support. So I can see this kind of situation going globally, and it's very important.
Thank you, Miriam. Yeah, the question of duty of care of the government for their citizens who are protecting human rights and environmental rights. It's an ongoing question, and how to hold them responsible and what does it look like. Thank you for that comment. So we are at a time. I am sorry if we did not address all of the questions. I want to make sure we also have time to bring in our final speaker. So thank you all panelists for your interventions today, for sharing. It's very powerful. And thank you all participants who asked questions. I would like now to introduce Kartika Sari, a representative from the National Committee of Tiruni in Indonesia. It's an indigenous and environmental network, national network. And Kartika is also a Frida Young Feminist Fund grantee partner, and she will deliver our closing remarks.
Thanks to my fellow panelists who exposed the critical situation for women environmental defenders in other regions. I'm Kartika, a young feminist member of Seruni, a national grassroots women organization in Indonesia that advocate for gender equity and women's rights. I work with rural and indigenous women in Central Kalimantan, in the Borneo forest, the second largest lung of the earth. This is also a region where the indigenous community live and fight to protect their livelihood from corporate exploitation. I'm here to send a clear message to the United Nations. Firstly, indigenous right to land must be recognized. Secondly, safety to environmental defender in Indonesia and in other regions must be ensured. This is why in the Borneo forest, there is a coal mining, timber, and large palm oil plantation. This extractive industry have caused the deforestation of more than 86% of land in Central Kalimantan through land grabbing. You might remember the haze disaster in 2015 and 2019. that affected rural and urban setting in Indonesia and in other close countries. This haze came from the increasing burning of our forests due to the expansion of the agricultural border. Deforestation also comes along with unprecedented flood and the pollution of river and land with agrochemical use in plantation. Our environment are being destroyed for the sake of the global economy of biofuel and commodities. Indigenous communities are losing their livelihood right now due to the expansion of this industry. Rural and indigenous women bear a very high cost in this context. Many of them who are disposed of their land end up working in the same palm oil plantation at very low wages. They cannot afford to send their children to school and have health issues associated with water and land pollution. When we protest the destruction of our environments, we also face harassed militarization and repression. Last year, one of the indigenous leaders in the region got arbitrarily arrested for being outspoken about the critical situation in our lands. I have seen the army shoot the protester during rural and indigenous mobilization. The indigenous people who report the palm oil company for planting outside their land use right were actually criminalized by the company for a native of palm fruit. In 2020, during the pandemic, the government approved a bill to allow easier permit for foreign investment in the country. Students, women, workers, and indigenous people protested against this policy because we know it means larger environmental destruction. When we protest, we experience increasing intimidation from the police. They surveil us, harass us, and we are afraid of our safety. As indigenous and young women, we know we can resist more strongly when we united. This is why we organize with other movements. Spaces like this even are crucial because they shed light on our context. While I appreciate being here, I can only do it because of my level of English. Unlike my sister in Surni who would like to be here, speaking in our native Bahasa. This is why it is important that this space also ensure the inclusivity of young feminists. The situation of rural and indigenous women in Kalimantan is critical. We need the international community to ensure safety for those of us, rural and indigenous women, youth, and students who protest environmental destruction, particularly now during a climate emergency. We need the United Nations to recognize the right of indigenous people to their lands. Ultimately, the government must stop the environmental disaster occurring in the Borneo forest, and we need the international community to hold it accountable for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kartika, and really appreciate your presence here, especially as a young woman doing this work. Very inspiring, and thank you for this testimony. We actually have a few minutes left, and looks like both Phyllis and Irina are back online, connected. So I'm being suggested to try to ask them, come back to them with questions to see if they can come back on screen. And yeah, Phyllis and Irina, so while you were disconnected, I was asking a question about protection needs of women human rights defenders, and specifically around, various aspects of protection when you threaten doing this work. And I know both of you have experienced it. What are the recommendations you have for the international community and for the state representatives, how that protection can be increased? What is missing based on your experiences? Maybe Irina, we'll try with you first. Irina, are you connecting? Okay. Phyllis, we'll try Phyllis.
Hi, I think for every woman, the first thing that would deter you from continuing with your work is when your family is threatened, especially your children. Women become very, and it's a soft spot that I have seen that is picked on so many times for myself. Every time when I'm threatened, maybe text messages, or when they want me to stop doing what I'm doing, they target my children. They would tell me that this is, we know where your child is. There has been an attempt on on my son's life. They attempted to kidnap him. It was not possible, so they picked a child of one of my community liaisons. And therefore, the protection should not end at the defender herself, but the protection should be should encompass her family, for especially the children that the children of the women defender, because it's only when your children are secure that you can actually continue carrying out your work. I know severally when my children are threatened, the first thing I do is relocate them to a safe place. Then I can come back and continue my work boldly, knowing that no one can touch my children. So just to ask that the mechanisms that are created for protection of women rights defenders should include especially their children. The other thing is maybe we could find a way to have faster response, because women are very vulnerable, and I've seen most of my women colleagues being killed, like Bata Cáceres. There's a female environmental rights defender in Kenya who was killed last year. They had already raised signals that something was going wrong, that they were under threat, that they were being monitored, but no one responded to this on time. I remember in 2015 when I was with Bata Cáceres in San Francisco, she raised the issue that her life was at risk. In her speech, in her final speech, she said, I'm giving my life, because she knew for sure if she went back, she would be killed. But we did not respond on time. All of us did not respond on time, and she ended up losing her life. So there should be faster mechanisms. I know even for me, sometimes there have been times when I do not want to leave my community. I'm told that you have to leave, but I feel like maybe what I'm doing, if I leave, would weaken the work that we are doing. So sometimes we feel like, no, I need to be around for this to continue. But there has to be a way to ensure that the defenders are secure, that even when they leave, they can come back and continue doing their work when a a safer environment is created. But also, when we are maybe relocated for safety or something like that, there has to be mechanisms to work with the local actors, like the police, the government, the security agencies, to ensure that they are also cooperating in terms of protecting the defenders. Because most of the time you flee and you come back and the situation is the same, except when actually I have seen international community writing to the government telling them, I've seen the UN Special Rapporteurs especially doing press releases saying, we need the government of Kenya to protect Phyllis. And immediately they do that, then I start receiving response from government, because sometimes you can go to the police and they refuse. They would write a statement and refuse completely to act on it. But when they receive such letters, then they say, okay, Phyllis, can you come back to the police station? Why did you take it so far? Let us see how we can assist you. I know that, like when we were in court, I was assigned a police officer to be with me for almost a year. Especially when I'm in court, I was assigned a special room which is protected by police. This was done because of the international community that intervened in our case and demanded that I'm given protection even while I was giving my testimony in court for our case. So it's very important that we shorten the response mechanism, but we also widen it to include the local actors, to identify the actors around the defender that can help protect her and her family. but also on networks, creating networks that respond. I know now that when I post, for example, on social media that my life is on attack, I posted once and there was immediate response from the whole country, and people are calling, even police stations, calling the high-ranking police officers, telling them that we need you to protect me. So we need to create those kind of networks where there can be very fast moving information when a female rights, environmental rights defender raises an alarm that her life is at risk, because usually it takes a very short time for them to lose their life. So there has to be a faster way that this information can move within our systems to generate response that will protect these defenders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phyllis, for this such a powerful and practical advice, especially really honing in on the gendered aspects of protection and things that one might forget, that women also are caretakers and they have families, and there are actual needs that around not just themselves, but also their families and community. On that powerful note from Phyllis, I would like to conclude our event for this morning. I would like to once again thank everyone, the panelists, the participants, for attending the session today, and thanking everyone for their tireless efforts in supporting and empowering women around the world. And yeah, and the event is closed. Thank you, everyone.